Just want to note that this presentation will be recorded and posted on the BAWSCA website. So hi everyone, my name is Linda Grand and I'm from the city of Milpitas. And here we also have Michelle Tran from the city of Hayward. And our instructor tonight is Jennifer Ahlstrand. So we're super excited to host this Gardening with Succulents workshop. Before we get to the actual presentation, I just want to go over a couple ground rules and a couple setup of how it's going to work via the Zoom webinar. So first of all attendees are muted by default. This is to reduce background noise and so that you can focus better on the presentation. We will be pausing periodically throughout the presentation to allow for questions, and we highly encourage all of you guys to ask questions that you have. There are two ways that you can ask questions. So at the end of the presentation, we'll do a longer Q&A. So for that section, you can raise your hand, which you'll see at the bottom of the screen, and the moderator will unmute you to ask your question. During the presentation, you can type your question into the Q&A, and then Michelle or I will read your question to Jennifer throughout. If during the presentation we don't have time for all the questions, please stay because at the end we will have a longer Q&A. So that is, and as I said before, the webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the BAWSCA website to view later on. It will be sent to all of you. So just want to give a little background about BAWSCA. So BAWSCA represents 26 agencies, which include cities, water districts, and it purchases water from the San Francisco Regional Water System. BAWSCA member agencies provide water to 1.8 million people and over 40,000 businesses and community organizations in Alameda, Santa Clara, and San Mateo counties. So BAWSCA's goal is a high quality supply of water at a fair price. So we have several program objectives. Outdoor water use represents the single largest untapped opportunity for water conservation in the BAWSCA service area. Outdoor water use can be reduced through water efficient plans and innovative techniques that can help conserve water and ensure that the future water supply meets the needs of our community. Now, while we've made significant strides in water use efficiency in the past, there's still more room for improvement. So, as I mentioned before, reducing outdoor water use, we have several different conservation programs that may be of interest to you. So for you residents that are joining us from Milpitas, we work with Valley Water to have several different rebate programs. So we have the landscape rebate program, which includes landscape conversion rebates of $2 per square foot of any lawn that is replaced with drought-tolerant plants, like some of the succulents you will learn about today. And then we also have irrigation equipment upgrades, which will help water those drought-tolerant plants. And then we have rainwater capture rebates, including rain barrels, cisterns. So those are definitely some of what we offer. We also want to promote our WaterWise indoor survey kit, which is a great thing to do right now while you're home. You can do it with your kids, and it'll help you find leaks at home. And you can go to the savewatermilpitas.org to learn more. And then I'll let Michelle talk about some of the offers in Hayward.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. So we are co-hosting this webinar with City Milpitas. If you are a Hayward resident, we do have several water conservation programs available for you guys. One of them being the lawn conversion rebate. The goal of all these water conservation focused classes that we host is that you can take some of this knowledge and apply it to your own home and your own garden as well. So we do still have an ongoing lawn conversion rebate with those rebate amounts listed here on the slide. We also offer some free low flow water fixtures you can pick up at our city hall when you're not in quarantine, and they're free to all residents and businesses as well. We also offer rain barrel rebates for rainwater recapture and reuse. In addition, we're also revamping our water conservation programs this year, including having a portal that can allow all residents, businesses to monitor their water usage in real time. If you have any questions about any of our programs, feel free to reach out to me or Linda. We can definitely give you more information, and our website is linked down below as well.
Yeah, and for residents of other BAWSCA agencies, similar to what Michelle mentioned, the Lawn Be Gone program, which provides rebates of $1 to $4 per square foot of lawn that is replaced. And then there's also a rain barrel program, which provides rebates of up to $100 for purchase and installation of rain barrels. And then a new addition for the BAWSCA programs is the Smart Controller program, which provides instant rebates and heavily discounted pricing on purchase of the Ratio 3 irrigation controller. This controller can be operated on your smartphone and normally retails for $280. Though this program, customers of participating water agencies can purchase a controller for $100 plus tax. Last but not least, look out for BAWSCA's redesigned landscape rebate program, which is scheduled to launch July 1st, 2020. And this will incorporate the Lawn Be Gone and the Rainbow rebate program. So just to clarify, so BAWSCA, like I said, it works with several different agencies. So you can look up and make sure that your water retailer is part of BAWSCA, which probably is, since that's how you heard about this webinar. And you can look to see specifically to your retailer which programs through BAWSCA they use, or if they, like Milpitas, use more Valley Water programs. We have a question about programs in the SF area. For the city of San Francisco, they, I believe, have their own rebate programs. And then we just wanted to let you know about some upcoming webinars. So as you can see here, BAWSCA is holding several online Zoom webinars, and we really hope that you can join us. Milpitas will be hosting the one on May 14th, and then the drought-tolerant habitat gardens on May 16th and June 1st. So hope to see you guys then, and hope you can definitely attend the other webinars to learn even more ways that you can conserve water outside. All right, so now I am, oh, you can go to bayareagardening.org for more tips. It's okay. For more tips and resources of how to do water-wise gardening at home. So now I'm gonna jump to our main program. We'll be happy to take any questions on the rebate in the Q&A chat box. If you have a specific question for me or Michelle, we can respond to you directly. And now I'm pleased to introduce our instructor.
Hi.
So Jennifer is the owner of West Wind Succulents. She loves being in the garden, and her mom became a horticulturist and landscape designer while Jennifer was in high school. Her first job was helping her mom with propagations and helping with the landscape business. Before she started her succulent business, Jennifer studied painting and sculpture at California College of the Arts and worked at Macy's in San Francisco doing window display production and design. After leaving the corporate world, she began working more often with landscaping with her mother's business and doing various freelance artwork. Meanwhile, she started growing succulents on a windy rooftop in West Oakland as a hobby and found herself only wanting to be more in the nursery. In 2018, she created her business, West Wind Succulents, which is now in Lafayette, California. She specializes in eco-friendly succulent decor for weddings and special events, as well as custom arrangements and small-scale landscape designs using plants from her nursery. And she teaches several workshops on classes on crafting and gardening with succulents. So we're super excited to have Jennifer here with us. Jennifer, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so succulents are awesome, as many of you probably know, and that's why you're here. And yeah, I think that they're a really good beginning plant for people that may not have much experience with gardening. Like I said, or like Linda said, I worked with my mom a lot gardening and learned a lot from her. But it wasn't really until I started playing with succulents that I really felt comfortable, because they're so forgiving, and yeah, they just allowed me to really like dive in and experiment and not worry about them being sensitive, and yeah, they were great, and I fell in love, and so they're a really great thing to use for your garden in all areas. So the first thing that we'll talk about is the design. So obviously I come from an art background, so that's one of the most fun things for me about gardening is the design and the colors and shapes. So that's a really good starting off point, I think, for you to think about when you're gonna start designing your gardens. The most important elements are a balance of variation of color, texture, sizes, and shapes. These elements can create movement. So depending on where you place things, it will kind of dictate how your eye moves through the space. If anyone's taken painting classes, it's a very similar description. So the first thing I'll talk about is color, because that's generally what I start with when I'm laying out a garden, and when I'm choosing plants for a garden. Obviously, I'll take into consideration like things like light and temperature and things like that, which we'll go into more later. But ultimately, I kind of create a color palette. Like when I'm gathering plants from my nursery, I will literally just group them together, even in my car, and kind of look at them in my car before I go to the job site and think, oh no, this color doesn't work, that color doesn't work, or I need more of this color. So I feel like it's just a really good foundation to start with. So this is a good example of like, it's a pretty restrictive color palette, but the colors really speak to each other really well. And it's like very distinct. Like someone had a very clear vision of what they were doing when they did this garden. Something I like to think about is what's called a bridge color. So let's say, for example, in this garden, there's the very bright yellow and then the blue. And then you have this great grass over on the right that kind of has a blueness to it, and it really brings those together. This can also happen in plants that have multiple colors within them. Let's see what my next slide is. Okay, so thought I had a picture of that, but I don't. But anyway, I have a plant that I love. It's called Tradescantia greenlee, and it's super purple. You've probably seen its most common relative is the Tradescantia purple heart. But Tradescantia greenlee has like these very round purple leaves, and they have bright green centers. And so that is something I love to use where I have a lot of big bright green things, and then if you just have a hint of that bright green color within another plant, that can really tie things together and kind of be a bridge color on its own as well. Another thing to think about are textures and shapes. You can see, for example, in this shot of this garden, you have the sedum that is a very fine and soft texture, and it contrasts very nicely with an agave, which is like sharp and geometric and broader leaves. And that is also something to think about. Contrast is good. You don't want like all the same texture. You don't want like a bunch of little petals, because I find that it all just kind of blends together that way. Same with color. That's why you want differentiation between all of these elements, colors, texture, shapes, because otherwise you just kind of lose the plant. You know, what's the point of having 5 different succulents if they're all very similar, and they'll just kind of, when you look at it, just kind of becomes one big lump, and then you know they're not getting the credit they deserve, if that makes sense. So okay, then the next really important thing is movement and grouping and spacing. So you can see for this this garden in front of this really modern house, the plants look nice and random. I think that's, you know, all of this is up to personal opinion, right? Everybody likes different things. But I find generally successful landscape design looks natural. Sometimes, you know, it's cool to have a lot of one thing all in a line and things laid out really geometric, depending on, again, your aesthetic. But I think overall, you're working with plants. They're natural. You kind of want them to feel like they belong there, or they just grew there by themselves. So sometimes it's tricky because you're doing it, but you want it to look like it just happened. So having a bit of randomness helps with that. So you can see how these are kind of like these big spiky yucca are all kind of scattered at different, some are far back, some are forward, and they kind of do a zigzag. They're not just in a straight line. Also, the addition of rocks adds good movement. It adds color and texture as well. And we'll talk more about rocks later on as well and how that helps. Here's a good picture of that. So let's see, hopefully you can see. This is kind of what I was talking about before. So these are all, for me, these would all be kind of questionable if they're good designs, right? Again, just my opinion. But for me with this first slide is a little bit too stripy. You have a big chunk of aeonium, a big chunk of agave, and then a different kind of aeonium. And it doesn't look natural. It's just kind of like big blocks of colors, right? Like, I feel like it would be so much more interesting if you broke it up with, let's say like a big blue agave there, or a rock or something to break it up. And again, here, this to me is an example of a bad use of rocks, because when I look at this, all I see are the rocks. I see the succulents a little bit because they're pretty colors, but it's just kind of like, boom, stripes of rocks. Like, it looks very unnatural. Again, if anyone thinks this looks great, I'm not, again, it's all to each his own. But like, just hopefully you can understand what I'm saying. Like, for me, it draws the eye to the rocks instead of the plants. And then this I put in here as an example of scale. So these rocks I feel like are a little bit too big. They're almost the same size as like the leaves of the succulents. So again, they're a little bit distracting. Let's see. Again, let me just talk, well, I can talk about the spacing in here too. So these are examples of size, height, and scale. But they also are placed really well. So you can see in here, there's a nice variation of color. This is a crazy garden. Like, I would be proud if this were my garden. But it's great because there's a lot of different textures. You have this ruffly dark purple right here. You have the little leaves of this crazy, it looks like an Echeveria hybrid here. You have big leaves agaves, and see how it kind of, your eye dances through this space. Nice. You can stop and kind of rest on each thing and enjoy it. You have this nice euphorbia that's like totally different than anything else. And it's all because of that nice difference in not only texture and leaf size, but in the height of the plants. You have things that are high and low, which this is a really good example of that as well. So see how they have tall things in the back against the fence, because the fence kind of acts as your backdrop, right? So if you had these tall cacti in the front, you're gonna lose everything behind it. So that's something to take into consideration when you're planting your garden too, is how big things will get. So this is always something that's tricky for me. You want instant gratification, but you have to think, okay, I have this, like this just happened to me right before shelter in place happened when I was doing a garden. And I had these kalanchoe that were small, and then this other plant that was more mature. But I know that this kalanchoe is going to eventually get bigger and taller than this plant. So as tempting as it was for me to put the bigger plant behind the little kalanchoe, I had to remember, okay, this kalanchoe is gonna get tall. I wanna put it in the back, and I gotta be patient. And so that's something that is tricky for people, and even for me, is to visualize what it's going to be. And the great thing about succulents, like I said before, is these are the perfect plant to practice with, because unlike other plants that can be very unforgiving and delicate if you transplanted them, these don't really care. So let's say you thought something was going to be small, you thought you liked where it was, and then in a year you don't, you can move it, and it probably won't care, and it will be fine. So again, great plants to start with. Let's see. So these are some other things to consider with the design. Is focal points are always a really good thing. So looking back on this garden, we don't see the full garden, but ideally there's like a place where there's either a resting place of negative space, or there's some kind of focal point. So see how this garden has this nice big fountain. It has a path winding through, but the fountain kind of becomes this nice focal point. And then you have all the succulents nestled all around it and in the backdrop of that. So that's something to think about. And rocks, like we said before, they're visually interesting. You can use big ones, small ones, top dressing. You know, consider the color of your plants, consider the size of the pebbles. They make your succulents happier just because succulents naturally grow in and around rocks. So if you have rocks nearby, they're gonna like that. Another thing to think about is your front yard versus your backyard. Your front yard, you might think of it kind of as like what you wear to work. It's your best foot forward. You, which I guess a lot of us probably aren't thinking about that as much these days. But it might be more formal and more kind of showy, or you know, whatever you want. But sometimes I like to think about that like this is what you're going to drive up to every day. You're going to see it first, and it's usually not where you're spending quite as much time. So the backyard, you might think of it as being a little more functional and having smaller moments of big impact versus the front yard. Oh, be safe with spikes. That's something I've learned the hard way. Be careful where you put things with spikes. Don't put them close to walkways. Don't put them near your hose bib. Don't put them in high traffic areas because they hurt. A lot of them even have little little hooks on the end that you can't really see. So if they touch you, they will literally hook into like Velcro, and they really hurt to take out. So be careful. Remove things that aren't working. I can't tell you how many times I've done yards that there's just something someone really wants to keep, but it really clashes with the whole design. It's, you know, it's like a different style. So that's something to think about too, is like that picture I showed you of the modern house, you know, that looked really well with a little bit more stark, really intense geometric plants. Whereas maybe if you had a more traditional house, like a cottage style or something, you might want to choose some softer, some softer, more flowery, soft edged things. So why don't I stop there? If anyone has any questions about that.
Yeah, Jennifer, we have a couple questions.
Okay.
So we have a question about design. If you keep odd numbers in mind, such as groups of like 1, 3, or 5.
Yes, that is a really good point. Thank you. I think I like zoomed by that. That is great. Yes, I generally do that. The only way I would ever really use 2 of something is if I'm like flanking the side of a door. But yes, 3s and 5s, odd numbers are very good. And staggering things is also really important. Like I said, to make it look natural. Like I was thinking about this the other day. I feel like I think a lot in triangles or zigzags or arches, you know, do things that are like peppering things, kind of like, yeah, triangles are good, 3s are good. That makes sense and answers that question. Again, another like art rules, art compositions.
And then this question looks like probably you'll get to in this slide, but I'll bring it up of what design you suggest incorporating with some California natives or drought tolerant plants, like how to incorporate that with the succulents.
Yes, yes, that's what I was just gonna get to. Yeah, so companion plants are very important. You may have noticed in some of the slides there was a lot of grasses are great, which I have the next slide, but drought tolerant trees are great. These are some examples: the acacia, Circidium, sorry. And this one is blocking by this video. The dwarf eucalyptus are amazing, but there's lots of shrubs and trees that, have these like powdery colors and that they're either larger than succulents, right? So again, talking about different sizes and shapes and heights, having something bigger like a tree or a shrub is really going to break up the space. And also provide, when we get to light, they provide a nice break from the sun. So, a common misconception is succulents want all day sun. They can handle it sometimes, depending on where you are, but they really would prefer some filtered sun and some shade, especially in the hottest parts of the day. So like something like this would really help with that. Also, again, thinking about just taller succulents, and if you like, if I have a little delicate echeveria, but I really want to put it in there, but I have a nice big tall bushy kalanchoe near it, I would put it right next to it, and just knowing that as the sun moves, it's going to get a break from that plant blocking the sun a little bit. So then here, let's just go on to the next. Here's some more examples of companion plants I like that are drought tolerant. Grasses, this blue fescue, man, I can't tell you how many times I've used that. It's so great. That blue is awesome. It doesn't get too big. You can kind of pop it in anywhere. Protea are amazing. You just have to be careful about the soil. Make sure that it doesn't have high phosphorus. It's the only thing that they're finicky on, but you can see this is a slide from the Ruth Bancroft Garden in Walnut Creek. If people know of that place, if you haven't been, I think they're about to reopen soon, so you should totally go. It's one of my favorites, and tons of stuff is in bloom right now. But you can see like this ice plant is going nuts, and then just having that pop of color in the back is really great, and having that different texture. And then the manzanita is a good one too. Yeah, so did that answer that question? Are there any other questions about companion plants? Basically anything that's drought tolerant. Good.
Our last question is about irrigation. If you suggest installing irrigation for succulents.
Yeah, I will get to that in a few more slides. We'll talk about water. But yes, generally, irrigation is a good water saving way to go. Okay, so I talked about that. Okay, so getting to know succulents. I'll read this too. Defined only by the water stored in the leaves, succulent plants have tremendous variety of color, textures, growth habits, and forms. Their ease of propagation, drought tolerance, and low maintenance requirements make these plants a perfect choice for practically everyone. Like I was saying before, succulents want to live. They naturally grow in incredibly unforgiving climate, so they have found ways to ensure their survival. They are very forgiving and the perfect plant for the beginner gardener. There we go. There are two general types of succulents, although I find myself not referring to this that often just because everything's so different, but a lot of people will understand what you're talking about when you talk about hardy versus soft are the two main categories. It basically just means things that are cold and frost hardy, things that, like they can handle more shade or not, or more sun or not. Yeah, so the hardy succulents are great for colder climates. And they also have really good spring and fall color because of that. Their ability to handle those temperatures, they usually also change during the difference in temperatures. Soft succulents are known as tender succulents. We have a crazy range of colors, shapes, and sizes, but a lot of them will freeze if they get down to freezing temperatures. So you just have to be careful. You know, there's ways to deal with that. You can make sure you plant them under a tree or close to your house, or if you have something that's really delicate, you could keep it in a pot and then just watch the weather. And if there's going to be a cold snap and a time where it's predicted to be pretty cold, pull it either into your house under an overhang. It's really amazing how overhangs really do help. They just kind of keep those last few degrees from hitting the temperature from getting just down to freezing. So that's something that I found helps. If you really, really want to, you know, you're in a place where sometimes it gets freezing, but you really, really want to put something delicate, like I would just go for it and just watch the weather. And like at Bancroft Garden, they've even developed little boxes, like plastic wood boxes that you can put over them to protect on those nights where it might get cold. But here's just some examples, like what were listed of the more hardy ones. Sempervivum, sedum is great. Sedum is a great ground cover too. It usually is a ground cover form, and it stays, especially this one, blue spruce, it stays very low and it spreads like crazy, and it's awesome. And the Opuntia, it has amazing flowers, and that thing's tough as nails too. Softer succulents would be the popular string of pearls, echeveria, and even the crassula jades. A lot of people know the jades. There's a lot of different varieties of jades. Those can freeze, but I have found them to be pretty tough, and there's so many different colors and shapes. There's like, people might have seen the ogre ears, which are like the little curled ones, and this one is a great example of a nice variegated one that has all these cool colors. You can see the edges get all pink, and that will change depending on how much sun it gets too. So I know this is not a propagation class, but this is my favorite part of succulent, so I just figured I'd show. This is like why I fell in love with them, is because they're so easy to propagate. So like I was saying, they want to live. They're different than other plants where you might need to use a rooting hormone, or, you know, you have to like baby them and water them every other day or keep them in a greenhouse. A lot of them, anything you can take a cutting from, you can grow pretty easily without a lot of fuss. But the most common methods are cuttings, dividing, harvesting pups, or some will even produce little seedlings themselves, and then you can also grow them from leaves. Cuttings is the fastest and the easiest. So anything that has any sort of stem, you can just cut and stick. I think I'm probably going to do another class on that. I think I can't remember what city, but we were talking about doing something in the works. So check the BAWSCA website for that, because we're going to do a whole one on just propagating, because I could go on for hours about that. But here's an example of the seedlings. So this is a Kalanchoe, gosh, how do you even say that? I think it's also called like crocodile something, but here's the Latin name. I'm not going to try to say it. And it actually grows little babies on its leaves, and then they drop off into the soil. And see, there's an example of a little one right there, and they'll just grow. These ones, this crassula is amazing. Right about here, I've noticed, I've tried to take cuttings from it down here, and if I bump it, the top just snaps off and falls, and I found little babies that just grow. So that's why there's so many different ones, is because it has grown so that maybe it's in a place where it's in a high traffic area. There's animals that walk by it all the time, so it learned that, okay, I'm gonna get trampled, or I'm gonna, like, something's gonna brush up against me, so I'm gonna just create this little part that breaks on the top and fall and grow more. So that's how that plant figured out how to propagate itself. My title disappeared of this one, but this one is supposed to be dividing. So this is a beautiful aloe. I forget the name of it, but you can see here, there's a million little like pups or offshoots. and you can just pull them apart carefully and plant each one individually. This is an example of leaf propagation. This is one of my propagation trays here. There's different ways to do it. I like to kind of stick it in the soil, but those take way longer, so you gotta be way more patient for those. Here's an example of healthy roots. They should be firm. Sometimes they're even fuzzy or hairy and bright. When you're planting things in the ground and taking them out of their pot, look at the roots, investigate them. If there's anything that has been damaged or rotted or dried out, just pull it away. Give it a nice, clean, fresh start. Also, too, when you're potting things in the ground, if it's something that's been in a pot for a long time, like this one, clearly, like you can see how it's just like perfectly flat, where it was pressed against the pot, give it a little tussle, break the roots apart. That's gonna, when you put it in the ground, it's gonna encourage the roots to go out that way, rather than just stay in this tight little ball, right? So encourage the roots to go. And again, some plants, you are told never ever to do this because they're like super finicky and delicate, but succulents, do it. If some of the roots break off, it doesn't care. It'll be fine. So that's why, again, such a good beginner plant, because you can be rough with them, you can make mistakes, and they will forgive you. So soil, important thing. It's really important to have good draining soil for succulents. They will take a lot, but if you notice that your soil is just really wet and not draining, you're gonna want to amend it. This little slide right here is an example of like doing a test. I've read a lot of different ways to test the drainage of your soil, but basically dig a hole, see how fast it drains. If it doesn't seem to be moving, you might want to consider like renting a rototiller and amending the whole thing. But usually you can just like dig a hole and mix in amendments like this. So there's lava rock and pumice. Lava rock tends to be better for landscaping because it's the color is probably the #1 reason. The color looks better mixed with soil. Pumice is better in pots because I've been told it has a little bit more nutrients that are better to have in pots, because when things are planted in the ground, you have all the natural minerals and everything in the ground, so you don't really have to worry about depletion and fertilizing and stuff like that like you do if you were just growing something in a pot. This is perlite. I wouldn't recommend using that in the ground because it is really, really light. When I use it for propagation, but it's so light, it's like styrofoam almost. So over time, it's just gonna race to the top and you're just gonna have annoying perlite on the top. So I would not use it for that. And you can get this stuff at just a nursery if you just need it in a few places. If you want a lot of it, I would recommend going to American Soil in Richmond. That's the one I know of where I am, but I'm sure there's probably some other ones down closer to Milpitas and Hayward. But they are great if you need a place. Okay, so watering. This is the best part. I think I've said that like 5 times. They're all the best parts because succulents are amazing. But watering, very little watering is needed. Now, little watering doesn't mean no water. Some people think, they've told me like, I don't know what's wrong with my succulent, it's dying. And I'm like, well, no, I don't water it. Or I missed it with water. No, you have to actually water it. You just have to water it less frequent than other plants. So my general rule of thumb is once a week. When they're in pots, you want to water deeply enough for the water to run out the drainage hole, and then wait for the soil to fully dry before watering again. In ground, once a week is good in hot summer months, and then less in cooler months. So drip systems are the best way to water. However, you can do sprinklers, and you can do hand watering. It really kind of depends on your level of time that you want to put into it. You know, the risk with using hoses and sprinklers is you have overspray, you might waste water, you might not get water to the places that really need it. Edges of things don't get watered when you do that. So drip systems really are the best way. Now, with that said, I will say that I like hand watering sometimes, what it does for me is it gives me a chance to spend time with my plants, if that makes sense. I feel like even if I'm weeding or, you know, I'm replacing something, there's nothing like watering to really make you slow down and look at your plants and pay attention to how they're growing. And you might notice a bug. I can't tell you how many times I've noticed bugs that I wouldn't have seen otherwise, because I'm just going about my life. I'm turning on my automatic watering system. I'm not really going and looking. So that's a thing to develop a nice intimate relationship with your plants, is to sometimes hand water. Are there any questions after all of that?
We have a couple, yes. So someone asked if you suggest doing succulents under pine trees. They're saying the soil can get acidic though.
Yes, that is risky. I have not had too much experience doing that, although I know that putting anything under pine trees can be touchy. I don't know the right answer for that though, actually. So I mean, I would say, honestly, I would say try it. Like I said, their succulents are so forgiving. If you have maybe you have like cuttings or something you want to grow, like, so I would try it. I feel like even if it was something they didn't like, I feel like they would show you signs of being unhappy, and then you could pull it out and move it right before like actually losing it. So I feel like it might, like, I would do it and see, or Google it, because that's something I don't know for sure.
And then we had a question of how do you suggest keeping succulents under control so that they don't overtake the garden? And is there a time of year that you suggest in planting the succulents?
Oh yeah, good question. Yeah, it's as far as taking over, I think it's totally up to you. I've seen people be like, oh my gosh, my succulents are out of control, and they're just like, there's too many of them, I need to trim them back. And I've also thought that, oh, it looks great and full and amazing. So it's really up to you, but you can chop at them. You can dig out part of the plant and move it somewhere else. Like I said, it's really forgiving. So feel free to cut, feel free to dig up, move around. I would say the only time that you really would want to do that for the health of the plant is, let's say you had like something really bushy that's like fully growing on topping and blocking light from getting to another plant. Then yes, for sure, clip around, make sure everybody's kind of getting enough sun. So that would be like the only instance, but otherwise I would say it's totally up to you. And as far as time of year, any major changes, I would wait till the warmer months, because in like winter, most succulents are kind of not growing, they're dormant, they're trying to protect themselves and get through. So I wouldn't do anything drastic during the winter, generally speaking.
Great, we'll do one more right now. So we have a question of, is it possible to amend compacted soil to grow succulents? Yeah,
like I was saying with the pumice, that will lighten it up. You mix it in. Again, like if your soil is like really clay and compacted, I would recommend using, like, renting a rototiller, like having like landscape architect team really get in there and do that. But overall, like if you're just planting a few things, just depending on the size of your garden, I've been able to just kind of, use a shovel and really like dig. You can let's say you have one area that's bad, or you have like a plant you're putting in, you can dig a hole like twice the size of the root of your succulent, and then really mix in that area with your native soil and your pumice, sand, rock to get it nice and draining better and like softer.
Great. Yeah, I'd say kind of continue on, and then we'll answer some more questions in a little bit.
Okay, great. Okay, so light, as I was saying before, they mostly prefer filtered light. Now this is kind of different depending on where you live and how hot it gets. So for example, when I first started growing succulents, I was growing them in Oakland, and the temperature there is a lot more mild than say in Walnut Creek and Lafayette, which is where I am now. And so where I was before, I didn't have nearly as much sun protection because the temperatures kept them from drying out and just from struggling as much. And so where I am now, you can see this is actually a picture of my nursery. I have the shade cloth up here, and I believe it's like a 40% shade cloth. You can get it at different thicknesses, just so that it's a little bit easier on them. You can, let's see, I'll actually read my slide. Although some will tolerate all day sun, most will look best with some relief and limited hours of direct sun. They will need less, so care-wise, right? So that's what I was saying, is they'll need less frequent watering if they have a bit of shade. Not enough sun and your succulents will stretch out, which is called exfoliation. I get this a lot from people who want to grow succulents indoors. You can grow some succulents indoors or grow succulents indoors temporarily, but what will happen is they'll get long and stretchy because they're literally reaching for more sun. So like a Senecio chalk sticks, I've seen just like you get this skinny, wimpy little stem and all of the petals start to spread out. I think I actually have a slide of that coming up, but and then too much sun and your succulents can burn. So that's something else with light, is some will tolerate all day sun, but you have to work them up to it. So think of it like you haven't gone in the sun all winter and then all of a sudden you decide to go to the beach and spend all day in the sun. Bad idea, right? You don't have like a base built up. Same with succulents, they will burn. So let's say you had something against the house, a super shady backyard. Oh, I want to put it out in the middle of my yard with absolutely no shade. It will burn. So gradually do it so it gets used to it. Let's see. Oh, I don't have a slide of that. But yeah, so it will tell you, when things are nice and compact and all their leaves are tight together. It's happy. When things start to grow differently and look differently, it's probably because they're reaching for the sun if they're skinny. Aloe are an interesting example of a way they will grow to protect themselves from the sun as well. So most aloe have the long skinny leaves, right? So I've seen aloe that are just baking in the sun, hardly getting any water. They're just like, growing on the side of the road somewhere, not cared for. And they will fully like go up like this and tighten up because they're literally trying to protect themselves from getting too much sun on them, versus another aloe that's been growing indoors and its leaves will flop open like this. It will stretch out because it's trying to get as much sun as it possibly can. So it's pretty cool because they will tell you by their body language what they want light-wise. Colors will change, all of that. It's freaking awesome. So as far as planting, you can, like I was saying, think about how big things are gonna get. But again, another forgiving thing about succulents is you can get away with planting them close together, because like someone was asking about trimming. If they end up growing too close together and smushing each other, you can either dig them out, pull them away, trim them down, or just let them go because they're used to being crammed. I love making my arrangements because I can cram a lot of succulents in one little pot and they will be happy for like at least a year because they're just used to being in tight spaces in between rocks, etc. Another important thing to keep in mind when you plant is be mindful of the depth your succulent was planted in when you receive it. If you planted too high, the delicate flesh that has not been exposed to the sun before can burn. The plant can become unstable and break, damaging the connection between it and its roots. So like, if you had this plant with a tall stem and it's heavy on top and you plant it too high, it might flop over. All of this section down here hasn't seen the sun. It might get sunburn like I was talking about. You don't want any of the roots to be above the ground. Make sure they're all buried. And on the opposite end of that, if they're planted too low, their leaves are touching the soil, they can rot. Dig the hole no more than double the size of your plant's roots is a good rule of thumb, although you could probably get away with doing it bigger if you needed to for some reason. They will also tolerate losing quite a bit of the roots and still thrive, so don't worry if some break. So like I was saying, when you go to rustle your roots, they'll be totally fine if it's if you break some off. I've been known to, again, in arrangements, I really want this one echeveria to go in here and I only have this much room, and I have been known to rip off half of its roots. I hate to say, but it didn't care. It doesn't care. They are like, okay, whatever. And they'll live in that pot for, like I said, a long time before it has to be replanted. So really, really go to town with them and experiment. I think, yeah, so that's it. So are there any other questions?
Yes, we have a couple more, and then guys, feel free to type more questions into the Q&A, and you can also raise your hand at this point and can ask your question to Jennifer directly, and I'll unmute you if you click the raise hand at the bottom of the screen. So we have a question. I know you've talked about having succulents in pots. They want to know what you think about growing a garden on a balcony with succulents.
Oh, they're perfect for that. Perfect. As long as you have enough light, and if you are limited to light, that's okay too. There are certain things that can tolerate less light than others, like aloe are pretty good. But yeah, growing things in pots is amazing. I would recommend like similar design rules like in landscaping. So I like to group things when they're in pots, do pots that are different heights, so you can get nice levels. Like I like clustering pots in the corners, doing the tall things in the back, small things in the front. Mixing the plants in one pot is great because, again, mixing all that different size and like shapes and colors and textures. But then also I think it's really fun too if you have, like we talked about focal points, if you have like a showstopper, like one of my favorites to put in a pot by itself is Medusa, Euphorbia Medusa, and it's just like this big, awesome, snaky guy. So like I would put that by itself and just let that, you know, be a little focal point. So yeah, it's a great idea. You can move things around depending on light or how big things get. But yeah, definitely. I grow everything in my nursery is all in pots, so they're fine with it.
Great. And then next we have, going back to the stones, someone's asking if you're familiar using EB stone for succulents.
EB stone? No, I don't know what that is. What did it? Can they describe what it is?
Chi, are you, if you're here and you want to add more to that?
It sounds like it's a brand of soil.
Oh, it's a brand of soil. Yeah, organics. I'm not familiar with that brand. But as long as has good draining, then it's good. Or so what I do with my soil is, I was talking about American soil. I love their ultra potting mix, and it's just potting soil, so it's not succulent mix. But what I do is I buy that potting soil because I absolutely love the components of it. It has coconut coir, which is, it's like hairy. It makes the soil dry really fast. It holds water for a good amount of time, but it also drains really quickly. And it does have a little bit of slow release fertilizer in it, which is fine as long as it's mild, which that one is. And what I do is I take that and then I buy a lot of pumice and I blend them depending on what I'm planting, right? So like if I was planting a cactus or an agave or something that I knew really wanted a lot more dry mix, I would blend it drier, or something like a sedum that has fine little roots that's gonna dry out faster and want more water, I do it in a little more potting soil ratio, if that makes sense. So I'm not familiar with that brand, but anything that sounds good to you, it's organic, that sounds great. as long as it drains.
Yeah, they're saying it's an organic fertilizer brand.
Oh, okay. Yeah, fertilizer's fine, again, as long as it's like numbers are low. So like I can't remember what each thing is off the top of my head right now, but like, you know, like 15, 15, 15, 15, 14, 14, 14, as long as it's not crazy, they will tolerate it. And again, that's good for in pots because like I was saying, you don't have the natural minerals that the ground soil has. So you need that to be in your pot. Also, if something's in a pot for a long period of time, you will probably want to fertilize it. Everyone has different schools of thought about this. Some people are like, no, succulents don't need fertilizer ever. They're tough. They don't need it. But again, if they're in a pot for like 3 years, every time you're watering that pot, all of the minerals are going, not all of the minerals, slowly the minerals are going out of that pot. So there's going to be nothing left and there's no other organics, bugs, you know, stuff replenishing that soil. So you're going to want to add like a slow release. I use Osmocote. I can't remember the exact one. I can post it somehow maybe on the website or something, but I use it like only like probably twice a year. And again, my pots are like little guys that I'm watering like once a week, so they're depleting. But in the ground, in your garden, you probably don't need to.
Great. Okay, next we have a couple questions on how to get rid of infestation, specifically aphids, and how to kind of keep these away from succulents.
Yeah. It is Mondo aphid season right now. I'm having the same problem. I just ordered some ladybugs. They like to eat aphids. You can, if you have a strong sprayer on your hose, get really close, spray it. You just want to be careful because if you have like a delicate succulent, you don't want to like damage the leaves or break the leaves off. But I find that's a good way. My other thing that I do if it's really bad, or like if it's on, let's say like a flower and it's just covered, I would just break it off and throw it away. If it's bad in the roots and somewhere you can't, or in the leaves and somewhere you don't want to do that. I have been using a mixture of rubbing alcohol and water. I do like 70%, so it's 70% alcohol. And then I cut that with about 30 to 70% water. So in a spray bottle, and I spray it. And that doesn't kill them all at once, but it kills a lot of them. And what I kind of do is like go back like every day and check, because like you're gonna miss a few every time you do it. So just kind of keep doing it. And also just like rub them off. It sounds gross if you're, you know, put on a glove, but a lot of times I will just like squish them and kind of rub them off. They end up going away, you know, after a little while. I feel like mine are dying down right now. So as much, I mean, I don't use pesticides or anything. So as much as you can do to avoid stuff like that, there are insecticidal soaps you can get that are organic, but I never use them. I find that they can do weird things to the coatings of the plants, and sometimes it burns them. And that's what I do. I do water and then squish, and then I'm gonna get some ladybugs. Which if you get ladybugs, make sure you have like water sources, because they're gonna leave if they don't have any water to drink. So like get a bird bath or something like that to keep them around. But yeah, that's what I would recommend. And also too, if it's not damaging your plant, some plants, it will make their growth super awful and weird. Other succulents, you won't even notice. They're just gross and you don't want to look at them. So if it's deforming the growth of your plant, worry about it. If it's not, I would say, you know, just kind of try to spray them off and wait for them to go away.
Great, we got a couple more questions. I just wanted to first thank everyone for coming. If anyone, since it is after 8 o'clock, if anyone does have to sign off, but please stay on. And I think Jennifer is willing to stay a little longer to answer some more questions.
Yeah.
So we have a questions about if there's any succulent cuttings that can tolerate being in water to root.
Oh, that is so interesting. Yes. I don't ever do that, but I all the time have people tell me that they do it, and I'm kind of like, okay. So yeah, ones that I've seen people do are like, I don't know if this is going to help because I don't know if people know names, but like Oscularia deltoides, which is in the ice plant family, those do it. I would say try it. Again, that is my rule of thumb with succulents is try it. If there's something you don't know, give it a whirl. I generally don't do that. I generally use what I was talking about, that perlite, and I do shallow trays and make sure it has drainage, and I just stick them in soil and I water that about once a week or a little more, basically whenever the soil's dry. And those, when I do cuttings, I don't put those in tons of sun. I usually put those like kind of tucked away, lower to the ground, only like a couple of hours of full sun a day, just because I think of them like they're kind of like babies. They're delicate. They're not actively growing, so you want to kind of baby them a little bit. And then when they get older and full root systems, you can slowly move them into more sun. But yeah, again, try it. Some might rot. That's my instinct, is that they're going to rot, but hey, people do it and it works. So
Great. Kind of building off what you were talking about before, are there any pests or diseases that you suggest to watch out for?
mealy are the worst. They are white, cottony little guys, and they like to hang out usually at the base of where a leaf connects to the stem. If you look really closely at them, they look like weird little like prehistoric fossil bugs. They're crazy. They're like kind of gray with a white powdery coating. They create these little like cottony, almost like spider web looking little things, and that responds really well to the rubbing alcohol mixture also. I basically use the rubbing alcohol water mixture for everything, and although it's not like a fix-all, like I said, if you're diligent and keep checking back on that plant, get the bugs you missed, same thing. But that's the one that is pretty awful. The other one that sucks bad that you won't see unless you look at the roots is root aphid. Sometimes people call that root mealy too, because it kind of looks like the mealy bug because it has like white little cottony things. So if you took your plant out of the pot, it's usually going to be on the outside, like the new, they like to, basically they eat your roots. So they chew on the new root growth. They're little jerks. And the thing that I have found that works the best for those is hydrogen peroxide, actually. So if you find it in a pot, that's better. And I feel like you usually find it more often in pots than in the ground, just because when things are in pots, they're just a little bit more prone to things like that, because to pests and issues, just because they're not in the ground, right? They're not in their natural state. So if they are malnourished and need some fertilizing, or if they're super pot bound and they're like all root and no soil, they're going to be more prone to stuff like that. So something to check if your plant is looking sad or like not seeming to grow, and sometimes I've even seen the plant just look kind of like saggy, pull it out of the pot, make sure it doesn't have root aphid, because they suck.
Then we have a question of how to encourage succulents to flower. They're saying that some of them do, and sometimes it's very rare.
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like 9 times out of 10, the problem with that is not enough sun. Sometimes it can be maturity of the plant, but I do think it's sun. So if like, and heat sometimes can do it. I feel like I had some plants in Oakland when I was growing in Oakland that were in too much shade, and then as soon as I got them in more sun, they went nuts, and I hadn't seen it bloom in 3 years, and then all of a sudden it blooms. So if you know something is supposed to bloom, that's the first thing I would try. And again, don't move it quickly, gradually. So when I say gradually, I would say like if you're able to do like a few feet a day into the sun, or like, again, with other plants blocking it. Like I have this big table out in my nursery that has some big plants on it. And I had a plant that I knew was wanting more sun, but I didn't want to immediately do it. I put it on that table, but I nestled it around taller plants, just because I knew that when the sun is going over, right, it's only going to get direct sun for a little bit, and the rest is going to be filtered bright. And then I slowly move those plants away from it. So that's a good way to do it too, if you don't have like shade cloth or something. So just be creative and use things to cut the light so that it slowly gets more light every day.
We have a question about a pretty purple succulent that you mentioned earlier, and what the name of that succulent is.
Oh yeah, Tradescantia. So the one that you probably see in landscapes the most is the Tradescantia Purple Heart, but Tradescantia Greenlee is my favorite, and it's spelled Greenlee, I believe, like Greenlee. There's also different, there's another one called, I think, White Puma, and it's similar. It has the shorter leaves, but it has more of a green color with like a white fuzz, and that one is freaking awesome too, and it stays low and it will spread, and it's fantastic.
Then I know you mentioned one public garden to view some plants. They're asking for any other suggestions of public gardens to view some succulents.
Yeah, the Cal Berkeley Botanical Garden has a lot of succulents. I haven't been there in a long time, but I remember it was amazing. And then another place that just off the top of my head, it's far, it's down south, but if you get a chance to go to the Huntington Library and Gardens in LA, it is the most insane amount of succulents and cacti I've ever seen in my life. Like I didn't realize the span of it when I went there, so I didn't leave enough time. I could have spent like literally 3 days there, because it's just like, if anyone follows me on or wants to follow me on Instagram, it's just at West Wind Succulents. I have probably like 200 photos from there, so I'm just kind of like slowly posting them. But I would recommend, like, if you're really into succulents and cacti, like, plan a couple of days to go there when we're able to, because it is. I was like one of those things where I was angry that I hadn't heard about it sooner. So that would be my recommendations.
Great. If anyone has any more questions, please put them through now. Please type them in the Q&A. We have a question. Feel free to give more specification, Imelda, but the question is if there's any edible succulents.
Oh, yeah, I mean, not really, not that I'm aware of, other than the like cacti. You know, if you get a Nepalese salad, that's what that is. It's the meat of a cactus leaf, paddle. I know that there are, you know, some aloe are edible. As you can see, there's like the aloe waters and stuff, but that's all that I'm familiar with. And also a note on that, not all aloes are okay to put on your skin, and not all aloes are edible. There's a lot that are actually poisonous, so don't experiment with that. But I would love to know if there are other ones. I don't know of any. Great question.
And then we have what is the best time of the year to plant succulents and prune them?
Oh yeah, I would say basically any time other than winter. Like really, there's not. I mean, spring probably would be like the ultimate best, right? Because then the temperatures are milder. So if it is adjusting to a new place, that would probably be the best. Or like late summer, early fall, so that it has some time before it gets cold for it to grow and adjust, right? So just basically nothing drastic in the winter is what I would recommend. Although again, if it's not a super cold time of winter, I've been known to do some cutting trays in the winter too, and I've had good luck. So recommend no winter stuff, but try it.
Great. I know we still have several people on, so if you guys want to type in a couple more questions. Also, if you raise your hand and you want to ask Jennifer directly, at this point, I can unmute you.
Yeah, I want to hear a real human voice. Like maybe I'm just talking to Linda this whole time. No, I'm just kidding. And then also too, I'll just say, like I was saying, if anyone wants to follow me on Instagram, message me on Instagram, send me an email. Like I totally don't mind answering questions about stuff. I could help maybe identify stuff sometimes. If I can't tell you the exact species, I could probably tell you the genus more often than not. So that can help you. Oh, another really good resource for that, for IDing plants, is worldofsucculents.com. It's one of my favorite websites for figuring out stuff. You can browse things by their genus, which would be like Crassula, Kalanchoe, and then you can look for like what is, sometimes it'll blow your mind what are in the same genus that look totally different, but it's a helpful way to figure out what you have or what you want.
Great. We have one live question. So Imelda, I'm going to click allow to talk. So if you want to unmute yourself now.
Yes, I did. Hi.
Hi.
I was about to ask you, but you answered already. You just told us about where we can find all the names for the succulents.
Oh, yeah.
You just said that already.
Yeah.
So,
and too, I've been known to, like, if that, because it is like a vast library of information. So sometimes I will Google like succulent with small bluish leaves and pink stem, and you'd be surprised if you kind of like sift through photos.
mm-hmm.
So, like you'll find some wrong identifications, but at the very least sometimes you'll get the genus. So you'll get, it's like a little wild goose chase, but you can usually find it that way too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, and also, like, I don't know if it is too dark already I wanted to show you one of my succulents that I have outside. And I was noticing that, I don't know if you can see it.
So unfortunately, we only, we don't have video for the attendees, but Jennifer can they email you, Jennifer?
Yeah, you can email me at westwindsucculents@gmail.com.
Okay, because I have my succulent that are just very nice flower, yellow and green. And I noticed today that it has a lot of brown spots.
Oh.
I was like, oh, what is this? I hope it's not dying.
On the flower or on the succulent?
On the, well, actually the leaves form like a big flower.
Oh, okay. Yeah, send me a picture.
Yeah, I will send you a picture, but what email address or?
Yeah, so my email address is westwindsucculents@gmail.com.
Too fast. Okay, Westwind.
We can type it in the Q&A. Yeah.
Oh yeah. There we go.
Okay. Perfect.
Good idea.
Yes. Okay, then I'll send you a picture, and then you can just kind of let me know what should I do with my plant, because I don't want it to die.
Yeah, sure. Don't worry, it's probably fine.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. All right, next we have a question about suggested place to purchase landscaping materials to sheet mulch the yard for a succulents garden.
Oh yeah. Mulch, I mean, the place that, like, my go-to place, like I said, is American Soil. They have all that. They have crushed rock of all different sizes and colors, and some mulch. I would just recommend like your like a big, if you need a lot of it, it's better to buy in bulk. So I would recommend going to like a big a big supplier. That's my go-to. Did that answer that question?
Yes. And then we have a question on some of the nurseries that have a wide selection of succulents in the Bay Area. If you know of any local Bay Area nurseries?
Off the top of my head, there's a few places in Berkeley. The Dry Garden is pretty good. I think Annie's Annuals in Berkeley also has some good ones. The Ruth Bancroft Garden in Walnut Creek does have a nursery as well. I really like their selection, and they have generally really good prices. Some of the stores, the specialty places in Berkeley that I mentioned, they'll have a lot of really cool stuff, but you might have to pay accordingly. Where off? And then unfortunately, off the top of my head, I can't think of any others because I mostly grow my own. So I will only really buy plants if I just happen to come across something that I don't have. Oh, I will say, again, it's not close, but worth a trip, and worth a trip now if you want to take a drive to, what is the name of the town? Escalon, I think it's Escalon, Ripon, R-I-P-O-N. If anyone's heard of Poots Cactus, P-O-O-T-S, they're an amazing family-owned nursery, and they have only cactus and succulents, and their nurseries out of their yard, and their front yard is freaking awesome. And it's all like basically you pull into the parking lot and you can see their entire garden. They have like a koi pond, they have tons of cacti, and I want to bet right now a bunch are in bloom, and it is one of the most amazing things you'll ever see, of just like these crazy huge cacti in like fluorescent pinks and yellows. And it's worth a drive to see the garden and to buy succulents. And I know that they are open, so take a field trip there, support them. They've been growing succulents for, I think, over 50 years. Sorry, I don't know others that are close.
Great. Any other questions? So we've got 14 people here. So anyone have any questions?
Also, if anyone wants to try, I just started doing this, so I thought I'd let everybody know, but if anyone wants to try propagating, I did just, like, because of this whole shelter in place thing and not being able to work, I created these like little propagation succulent starter kits on my website. So you can get just the succulent cuttings, but you can also buy like my soil blends. And it's a really fun way to kind of get a bunch of plants at once and try your hand at growing them. You can also totally, like partner with your neighbors, trade cuttings. Like the best thing about succulents is you can share so easily. So I would encourage you, if you want to play with growing them yourself, to do that.
All right, we just got a couple questions.
Okay.
We got a thank you, so thank you guys for joining us. And then they're asking if you work on residential designs for drought-tolerant landscapes for people.
Yeah, I generally do like smaller scale stuff just because my nursery isn't super huge, but I can order from bigger local nurseries for stuff that I don't have. There is a place called Devil Mountain that my mom turned me on to, and she goes to, but it's wholesale only. So I do have access to doing that, and I would love to do that. So yeah, if I'd send me pictures of your yard. Let's talk.
Great. We'll wait a couple more minutes for any other questions. I guess just kind of while everyone's sheltering in place, if there's any suggestions of some easy succulent gardening that you would say to do now while you're home?
Yeah, like I said, cuttings. Try playing with cuttings. Play with colors. There are like lots of people sell succulents online, and shop around with that, because I know you can get them shipped. And if there's, I try to not do that because I would be totally poor because I would just buy everything I don't have. But that's something fun, buy a few plants online, play with them, get pots, put them in bigger pots, play with making arrangements, and yeah, just have fun. Like I said, that's how I fell in love with them, because I just played with them and they forgave me if I forgot about them for a week or more. And if I broke them, they kept growing, and just, yeah, they're just fun.
Great. Any other questions before we all say goodbye? Thank you again for joining us.
Yeah.
Please reach out if you have any questions about our rebate programs. And please look at the future classes. Jennifer will be holding another one soon on propagating.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have some other great instructors too about how to save water at home and outside. So please join us for future ones. So we'll wait a couple more minutes if you guys have any other questions.
Oh, and I will say too, actually, I'm depending on how long this sheltering happens, I'm probably going to start doing like crafting with succulent Zoom classes. So that will be fun. So look for that. Or honestly too, if you're interested in doing that, like with a group of your friends for like your Zoom happy hour, I can ship you little like kits. We could do a wreath or something, and I'd ship you everything you need, and we can do like this, but make some succulent crafts. And the fun thing about that too is if you make a wreath, you can then in the future take off those and propagate them and then put them in your yard eventually. So that would be a fun plant thing at home.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Oh, we have one last question. How do we know if we are over or under watering?
Yes. Oh, that is such a good question. I think I got excited about something and breezed by that. Yes. So if you're overwatering something, your succulent will rot, and signs of rotting are mushy, water-filled, dark leaves. Usually that starts happening at the base of the plant, so it's sometimes harder to see. And then if you're not watering it enough, the tips usually get dry. Basically, crispy is under, mushy over. Also, if your soil, always touch your soil. Sometimes the top will look like it's dry, but if you stick your finger down on the side of the pot or into the ground, down a ways, make sure that it's actually dry, and not just like the very top layer of dirt is wet. When in doubt, don't water. I always say err on the side of not watering if you're not sure if you're overwatering. But a good rule of thumb is once a week.
Great. Any other questions? All right. We'll wait a couple more minutes.
Yeah, and my website's on the bottom of the screen too. And like I said, email or Instagram, message me. But yeah, I can't wait for these other classes. I'm gonna take some of these other plant classes. Looks like a lot of good ones. Are people from all over, right? Watching, joining?
Yeah, we have people from several different BAWSCA agencies. So
Awesome.
Andre will be able to get back to us of where everyone's joining from. But
yeah,
we definitely have some people from Milpitas and Hayward. I think we had someone talking about Contra Costa County and San Francisco.
Great, that's so fun.
All right, well, we're not seeing any other questions.
Okay.
And we have some San Jose here.
Awesome.
Michelle, anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think this is great. And I think our contact information will be passed around, so feel free to follow up with any questions you might have as well after this.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Please, there will be a survey sent about this class and how it went. And thank you for all using the Zoom technology, and hope to see you at future classes. Thanks again, Jennifer.
Hi, you're
Thanks,
welcome.
Jennifer.
Thank you. Good night.
Everyone stay safe. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.